Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our final seminar of the first term. We're really delighted to welcome our ULAS to give a talk about what they've been doing this year. And I'm going to hand it straight over to the four of you to tell us what you've been doing.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming along. We usually do a roundup of all the different projects that we've been involved with this year within a given year, but we thought this year we'd do something slightly different. It's still going to be about work that we've been doing throughout the year, but we've chosen the theme of the work that ULAS does with the school with the student training field schools. This has been quite a long tradition of ULAS working with the department ever since ULAS became part of the setup here. And we've had some really great sites over the years, really good highlights on some of the kind of major monuments and archaeological sites in Leicestershire and Rutland. So we're keen to kind of keep that tradition going and highlight the work that we've been doing. Since COVID, we've kind of had quite a run of smaller short-term projects. Normally they're sort of 5 years plus to get the most out of each one. So they're the ones we're going to be concentrating on this evening. It was also quite pertinent because we're kind of going to be introducing a new field school, which will start next year, which I'll come back to later on. But before then, we're going to hear some of the details that we've been working on with my lovely colleagues. And I'm going to pass that over to the next person, which is Gavin. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. So the student training field schools are a wonderful component of undergraduate degrees within the School of Archaeology and Ancient History at the University of Leicester. And it's one of the reasons I chose to come here to study 25 years plus ago. And there's been all of the field schools are generally close to Leicester. So there have been varied Iron Age hill forts, medieval sites of all sorts as well. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in the teaching of these field schools, some of them on and off over the years. And I wonder how many other universities can offer these sort of good training field schools like this, linked with professional archaeologists, University of Leicester Archaeological Services. I'm not sure how many there are, but I think it's a great thing to have. In 2023, I was given charge to manage a new field school project, just a small scale one, for the second year's undergraduates in southeast Leicestershire. There we go. And that's called Lawton. And this project took place over 2 seasons. And really the interesting thing about this project is we had strong connections with the local community, the local heritage groups, and that's the Leicestershire Fieldworkers Group, who were involved throughout the project. And the Leicestershire Fieldworkers Group was set up almost 50 years ago. I believe they've got some celebrations planned in a couple of years' time. And they're really a local group who have a passion for all things archaeology in Leicestershire and Rutland, and do all sorts of things, field walking, test pits and small excavations. And it's thanks to them that they found all sorts of new archaeological sites across the counties. And it was thanks to the Oadby and Wigston branch of the Leicestershire Fieldworkers who discovered this settlement at Lawton a few years ago, and through the close connections with the local field walking groups and with academics within the department and ULAS, that this was flagged up as a potential research project. So the site itself lies a few hundred metres away from the village of Lawton. Lawton itself is a small village, or perhaps just a hamlet, just a few houses and farms in rural southeast Leicestershire, and it's on the hills along the Northamptonshire border. And prior to this study, very little was known about the prehistoric and the Roman periods in this part of Leicestershire. There are very few records in the HER, the Historic Environment Records for Leicestershire in this part of the country. And that's largely because it's rural. There's more sheep than people, and it's just a few fields. So perhaps nobody's looked in this area. There's no commercial development, so there's no excavations. But from 2020 to 2022, the Oadby and Wigston group undertook a big field walking survey, and it's thanks to Carol Gurnham for the images on this slide, and it just sort of demonstrates the huge number of areas that they looked at. So the field walking teams walked approximately 130 hectares over an area of 23 square kilometres. So that's a pretty good step count for the day, I'd say. And you can see on this slide many of the fields are walked that had never been looked at before. And if you take away the modern, the post-medieval and sort of more recent material that's found within the fields, probably from manure scattering, you start to see some interesting patterns. So this brilliant chart here shows high concentrations of Roman pottery if you look at the finds per hectare. And one site in particular sort of jumps out, it's labelled as Tophold, and that's our Lawton site. There's a few others in there that look interesting as well, perhaps for future studies. And so the group wanted to test their field walking results to follow it up with a geophysical survey, and they worked with the Hallerton field walking group for this one and did a brilliant survey of some 6 hectares, I think, huge area, and found these wonderful results. You can see the grayscale plot up here, lots of ditches all interconnected and pits and all sorts of activity, a really busy site of some kind. Is it Iron Age prehistoric, or is it Roman farmstead of some kind? So they wanted to test their results, and they did some in the autumn of 2021, I think, or was it 2022 perhaps. They did a few test pits. They're mainly 1 by 1 meter square, so quite small test pits that it's difficult to interpret what you're going through. The finds are well recorded, lots of Roman materials being found. But actually interpreting the layers was tricky, as it always is if you've just got small areas to look at. But clearly we have an interesting site here. Easily accessible Roman archaeology, and yeah, I sort of interpreted the results a bit, tidied it up a bit, and you can see it on the plot here. The whole area covers about 6 hectares, or the main core of the activity is about 3.5 hectares. If you like your measurements in football pitches, because obviously that's pretty handy, it's about 8.5 King Power pitches. Now it's all clear to you now. So yeah, that's the site really. You can see it on the satellite maps. You can see the topography as well. It's a fairly flat area, but slopes down dramatically into a valley. It's quite high up, and it looks right across Leicestershire. You can see way off to the north and Charnwood Hills. And really, yeah, so the site really has lots of potential, easily accessible. There's actually few Roman farmsteads excavated in Leicestershire. There's a few, but not many. We've got a few villas. You'll be hearing about them soon. And obviously, the Roman Leicester's been well excavated, and some small towns, but the farms not so much. So this site represented an opportunity to sort of advance research questions, research agendas in the East Midlands Historic Environment Framework. Brilliant document formed over sort of several decades of work, and sort of really justifies looking at this site and sort of trying to develop and move on research questions to do with Roman farmsteads and settlements. So what do we find? Let's have a quick look. Our earliest evidence, we didn't find any. We found sort of residual work lithics, so sort of hints at a sort of a Bronze Age activity going on the site. We didn't find any Iron Age activity in the first year, but in the second season, I know the local groups were interested as well. Was to investigate this enclosure way off on its own up to the side. Yeah, what's going on there? Let's have a look. So we located our trench in the right spot and found the enclosure. It may be a double-ditched enclosure. I'm not sure if we have any of these in Iron Age Leicestershire, or the ditch on the side may just be a linear boundary going off. But either way, you can see this glamorous photo of archaeology to tempt in new students. It was September and it was pretty windy up there, and when wind swept, and it was hard going through the Leicestershire clays. But we had a mixture of volunteers from the local groups and students working together in this trench. Worked really well, and they worked hard, and they were rewarded with a fine assemblage of Iron Age pottery. So we've got dating evidence from our enclosure. So that's nice to see. And we did find this interesting object in our first season in the main trenches. And this is a cosmetic pestle and mortar set. And they're unique for Britain. They're not a Roman introduction, so it's Iron Age. I think they date to the 1st century BC and used throughout that 1st century of Roman occupation. And yeah, an interesting object. There's only 15 recorded as being found in Leicestershire, so this adds to a small number. And sometimes they're called woad grinders for the obvious reasons of sort of grinding up and using makeup. But this is very small, and at the time we thought it was from a single piece, as demonstrated being held in the field there. They were found from 2 separate features, fairly close to each other, But in hindsight, after our specialists looked at it, they appear to be from two separate sets. One's much larger than the other, didn't quite fit together quite right. And we also put it through the XRF machine in the MAB building. So fantastic resources at the university, and thanks to Rachel Armitage for that. And this is the image cleaned up a bit. And if it's put through the XRF machine, you can see they're made from different materials there. So sort of useful to have those resources at the university to sort of question our finds as well. But moving very swiftly on to the Roman period, this is our main bulk of evidence. We decided to put the trenches in the main part of the settlement site. This was near to where the volunteers had put their test pits as well, to test some of the results, try and work things out. We found quite a complex period of activity. It all seems to date to the late Roman period, later 3rd century into the 4th century. And we're only looking at maybe about 2% of the known activity area. So it's just a small little window in, a small little look in. It'd be lovely to strip the whole field and have a good look on. We would do if they were building houses here, but it's just a very small window in to try and get a glimpse, a bit of an understanding of the nature of the activity here. And it's, as I said, late Roman in date. We found the finds have been looked at from the 1st season and reported on. The 2nd season, they've been processed and boxed up, ready to be looked at by specialists if funds permit. But yeah, we do need to complete that work to fully work, to sort of justify doing this. And just from the 1st season, then we had, I think, over 8 kilograms of Roman pottery. We had various hobnails and Roman shoes and carpentry nails, a few Roman coins and hairpins and that sort of thing. And lots of animal bones as well, really quite a large, I think it's like 700 fragments of animal bones from just that top trench. So quite a high concentration of food waste left behind. And within the trenches, we found various enclosures. One at the top there had gone out of use and then was remodeled in the Roman period. You can see in the photo, lots of cobbles. It was sort of a leveling layer, sort of a compacted surface placed over the top. So quite a high intense activity over a sort of 100 years or so. We also found a number of corn dryers, 5 in total, I think, within this small area. Corn dryers are found on Roman sites like this across the country. So quite a common feature, but quite a high number in this small area. And these are all a very sort of fairly simple form of corn dryer, not the advanced forms we see. And these were examples as well, to give us an idea of the kind of things going on the site. And then we have sort of intriguing late Roman, very late Roman activity as well. How far does it go into the Anglo-Saxon period? Well, in this ditch, we found remains of a human infant buried in the top fill of the ditch. It'd be nice to know what this burial dates to. Could do some sort of analysis on that. That'd be lovely to do. Does it date to the very late 4th century? We're looking at 5th or 6th century. We're not sure. But interestingly, we did find some Anglo-Saxon, which looks much the same as Iron Age pottery, in some of these Roman features in the upper fields. So there's a bit of activity taking place there beyond the Roman period in the 5th and 6th centuries as well. And interestingly, several brooches were recorded as being found in the field as well. So it's just hints of sort of the early post-Roman use of this site, but without any further work planned on this project, we may never know, but it's interesting nonetheless. So really just to come to a swift conclusion of this one, this site's a good one really to flag up the importance of the local community that have worked with us on all sorts of projects over the years, and the many decades of successful field schools within the department have often been due to this close connection. It's due to the good combination of the academic knowledge and skills within the department, but also the professional skills and the local knowledge of ULAS. And of course, don't forget the local volunteers as well, what they bring with their local knowledge and occasionally some nice cakes as well, which is always a good thing to include them. And obviously, having the local community involved is a good thing, because it's good to have a broad range of people involved in these projects. It's a great public community thing to allow people to engage in archaeology, which can often be hard to sort of reach. And it should hopefully foster good community positive attitudes towards the university as well. May even encourage some people to take up degrees at the university. So if these projects are like this are to continue, I think it's good to continue this strong collaboration with these local groups. And we'll find out more as I hand over to James for the next part of the talk.
Good evening, everybody. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate really what Gavin said at the start of his talk. I come to Leicester 27 years ago, and I was also drawn by the fieldwork experiences that I'd seen about University of Leicester before I came, and I really enjoyed my time on the field schools. So I'm really pleased that I've now managed to move in to professional archaeology and be involved and help on these field schools myself. So we're going to look at a field school that I was running, directing earlier in the year, a place called Catsick Hill Field School. Yeah, yes, it is another Roman villa. Okay, so a quick location check in case anyone doesn't know where the site is. Catsick Hill, it's a lovely name, isn't it? Apparently it derives from the surname of either Walter Cat or Roger Le Cat, rather than the idea that there's Catsick all over the hill. I didn't see any Catsick there, but I can't guarantee there isn't Catsick on the hill. So Catsick Hill is located about 1.5 kilometres northwest of the village of Barrow-upon-Soar, off Coates Road. It's located directly adjacent to the river, over the River Soar, but it's positioned about 6 metres above the current height of the river. Although the site itself is some way away from the village centre, it is actually only located about 200 metres away from the current residential limit of the village. This is due to the northern expansion over the village over the last few years. Yeah, so in 1971, I think it was, a ring ditch and several linear features, possibly representing up to 2 enclosures, were identified during aerial survey by Jim Williams. Anyone looking at the aerial photography shot, can you spot what was missed at the time, a Roman building? Can anyone see on there? Hindsight's a great thing. There is actually a Roman structure there that wasn't spotted at the time, which was a part of the villa. In the 1990s, 2 Iron Age coins were found on the field, and subsequent field walking has also located quite a lot of Iron Age pottery. But the main stuff that's been coming off the field is Roman. Since the 1990s, on the HER, we've got reports of 89 coins, 18 brooches, various finger rings, but also large quantities of pottery, tessera, and ceramic material. Possibly the most significant or interesting find to come off the field is this copper alloy hound figurine found by a dog walker, would you believe? Okay, so back in 2023, new crop marks from the site were brought to the attention of Leicestershire HER by Michael Parker, who spotted them on Bing Maps. The images clearly reveal a winged villa elongated broadly north-south through that, extending about 75 metres. The villa is divided into a complex array of rooms with a long corridor extending along the eastern face of the building. Wings extend both from the north and the south ends, and these are up to 30 metres in length, and presumably form a courtyard looking west over to the river on this side of the image. There's also a separate rectangular structure in the field to the east, located there. And we think that's probably another corridor building with a walled yard or enclosure. Richard Clark, the county archaeologist for Leicestershire, was clearly concerned about the potential risk of the site posed by the future development, and he approached ULAS to see if we could help put together a case for the site's future protection. It was then decided the site would make an ideal candidate for a first-year field school project to enhance the current understanding of the site with a combination of both geophysical survey and evaluative excavations. So we are Sumo Geophysics, the team that produced the super results from the Rutland Roman Villa that you could find out a bit more about in a minute, to undertake the geophysical survey across the site. John Gate, who I'm sure you all know from Time Team, is now the Time Team's director of, he's the geophysical consultant for the new Time Team shows that run off of YouTube, suggested working on a project collaboratively with Time Team, who wanted to produce a film that focused on the experience of students while on a training field school. So magnetic survey and limited GPR was undertaken across the site at the end of April, and the results were pretty impressive. So as you can see from the grayscale plot, there's multiple phases of activity across the we only surveyed the western field, but that is the main focus of the villa, obviously. But as you can see, there's multiple phases of activity there. You can see circular anomalies, obviously the large circular enclosure that was seen from the previous aerial photography. We also have various intercutting rectangular field systems, a coaxial field system running across in both directions of the site. And then we also have a double ditch enclosure that appears to enclose around the villa complex itself. As you can see on the grayscale plot, the villa area is really quite fuzzy. You can't really draw much interpretation out of the grayscale plot. And that's where the GPR really comes into its own. Because looking at the GPR time slices, we can see much more finer detail of the wall lines in comparison, and they actually complement what we could see originally from the crop marks you can see on these red lines here from the crop marks aerial photography shot. We can see deep structures located within the central part of the villa, and also down to in the south wing set off to the east side. We think that's certainly going to be a bathhouse. The time slices have also indicated the wall lines appear to be discontinuous in nature, and this is likely to suggest that there's a variation in the survival of the walls within the villa building itself. Okay, so the main aims were to sample a range of different areas and features across the site, to provide fieldwork training for first-year undergraduates, to advance our understanding of the character, the date range, the survival, the quality of deposits to support the future management of the site. Looking at the individual trenches, Trench 1 located in the main villa area. Here we wanted to investigate that deep rectangular anomaly, and we also wanted to look at the discontinuous nature of the walls shown on the GPR survey. Trench 2 up in the north wing. Here we wanted to investigate this western room on the north wing, where the GPR was suggesting the possibility of two apses within that room, and also investigate the linear anomalies that run to the west of the villa walls. Within Trench 3, this big long double width trench was placed to look at the various linear anomalies running across the site, to try and get a sense of the phasing that we have on the site, and try and work out when the occupation might have started and perhaps when it ended. And Trench 4 up in the top right was to obviously explore the circular enclosure and look at the anomalies that appear to intersect with it. So Trench 1. Trench 1, as I said, is located in the central villa complex. As you can see, we've got two parallel north-south robber trenches, one here, one here. As you can see on the image, the western robber trench is much wider than its eastern counterpart. They're forming a corridor or a portico, and presumably the one that the west is a weight-bearing wall, whereas the one on the east side of the building is just the corridor side, with presumably a shallow quite a lightweight roof structure above it. There is remnants of mortar floor within the corridor itself. The western robber trench connected to two parallel east-west robber trenches. These form the sides of two separate rooms extending westwards. The northern room corresponded with this deep rectangular anomaly that was picked up by the GPR. Within this, we found a layer of demolition between the robber cuts, and that then overlaid a pitched surface that appeared to represent a make-up floor for a long gone sunken floor. The southern room that measured greater than 6 meters long. We found no floor surfaces within that room, but we did find a thin layer of clay and stone chippings that probably represents again a floor makeup layer. Within the trench, we did find evidence of earlier deposits. Within all the robber slots we put through, we could see deep stratigraphy, and this northern slot you can see at the top of the image. We excavated a large recut ditch that contained pottery from the 1st century. There's some of the pottery there, a carinated bowl. And we also put a slot at the southern edge of the trench. And again, it seems this ditch has continued all the way through the trench itself from north to south beneath the villa walls. This is trench 2 up in the northern end of the villa complex in the north wing. Looking at the westernmost room, the original arrangement of the room measured about 6 meters long again, with projected width of 5.5 meters. The room contained a large rectangular apse at its western side. This measured 3 meters by 2.2 meters. Here there was slightly better survival. Most of the walls had been robbed, but only down to their foundation levels, whereas in the other trench we just looked at, all the walls were totally gone, apart from right at the very edge of the trench where we had a hint of a foundation. These walls were basically surviving at foundation just below the topsoil level. The southern wall survived as a robber trench beyond the apse and also measured 1.2 meters wide. These are really chunky foundation walls. Within the robber trench of the original southern wall, you can see these big, large lumps of granite blocks, but they're all they're not in their original locations. It's like they've been deliberately leveled, and this is probably to accommodate the later apse that's gone on the south side of the room. This curving apse here. The new apse measured 1.2 meters deep, and it's about 3 meters wide. Again, with a really chunky foundation comparable to the foundation of the western apse and the western wall. There was, again, most of the new apse had been truncated to foundation level, but we just had one single course of surviving upstanding masonry, which suggested the actual upstanding wall was narrower than the foundations it sat on. But they did give us more of an idea of the construction, because again we had this lower bed of pitch smaller granite that was then overlaid by much larger flat granite blocks like we saw in the earlier southern wall, but because these hadn't been dislodged, they were sitting flat as a plinth for the upstanding wall, which was somewhat narrower in nature. No floors survived in this room, unfortunately. Up at the northern end of the room, you can't really see it from that image, but we did have a little bit of sand that looked to be a makeup level for the floor, but nothing surviving otherwise. The disused layers above this building did contain a lot of tessera. These were stone and tile examples, which presumably suggests the room did have a tessellated surface at one point. The central and eastern part of the trench contained a thick cultivation soil. The removal of this exposed a T-junction of a much narrower set of walls. The north-south wall formed the eastern wall of the main room, whereas the east-west wall probably formed the north wall of a corridor leading into the central main part of the villa. Part of a room was located to the north of that corridor, but we had no floors and we got no real indications about anything about that room really. The difference between the thickness of the walls is really evident from that shot, but we don't know if it's indicative of different phases of build, or potentially is it just because those walls to the east are internal partitions. A few other features were located to the west of the building. The western apse truncated quite a large ditch, which produced first century pottery, and that in turn was truncated by a slightly later ditch on its western side containing second century pottery. The only other feature we had in this trench was right up the far end, which is a really substantial post hole, but it suggests that there's a big timber building nearby, but we can't really say anything else about it, unfortunately. And then trench 3, the big ditch trench. As expected, we found loads and loads of linear features. The two most northern features at the top, these ones were really leached. And looking at the geophysical survey, it suggests they arc and curve up towards that big circular enclosure. We excavated one of those ditches and it did produce Iron Age pottery. In the middle there, we've got a big wide east-west ditch, but that's actually 2 or 3 recut ditches, and that actually forms part of the coaxial field system that I've shown you, that we also found in trench 2, the ditch that was located beneath the western apse. Next to this big recut ditch, we had this rather enigmatic stone-lined pit. It's not very big. It's only about, what did I have it as? About 0.8 meters wide, 0.35 meters deep, with the remains of a stone floor in it as well. Lots of reused tile in it, so it's presumably later Roman or later, but unfortunately no finds were recovered to give an indication of its function or date, so it's a bit enigmatic really. What else we got in this trench then? So working our way further down the trench, we've got these 2 linears here. They are the 2 linears I was showing you at the start when I was showing the geophysical survey there, the double ditch enclosure that goes around the villa complex itself. And next to the northern of those 2 ditches, we've got a little sort of terminus of a smaller feature that we think potentially might actually be a human burial that's been placed on the boundary. These ditches bisect with a circular feature. We did put one slot through the circular feature and got a little bit of Iron Age pottery, and given the size and shape of it, you would presume it's the remains of a drainage gully for an Iron Age roundhouse. Finally, moving on to trench 4, this was looking at the circular enclosure, pretty much the first known feature on the site. We put the trench across the entrance, and as you can see, we've got 2 large ditch terminals forming a very narrow entranceway into the circular enclosure. Slot excavated through the western of these 2 revealed a ditch measuring greater than 1.5 meters wide by over 1 meter deep, that had been recut by a slightly shallower ditch, which the full width measuring 2.5 meters by about 1 meter deep again. The later ditch did produce Iron Age schoolware pottery. Just inside the entrance, we've got this little group of post holes, 4 post holes, and actually another post hole that you can't quite see that's just down in the side of the ditch as well. Clearly, they represent some kind of timber structure or multiple structures. I'd like to think they probably relate to some kind of gateway that's controlling this very, very narrow access into the enclosure. Immediately behind the terminal, we've got this small linear feature. I don't think that's a ditch or a gully. It has very, very vertical sides and a flat base. And it looks more structural in nature. So again, it might be some kind of a timber palisaded structure. Through the middle, which we could see from the geophysics before, was this ditch which has got Roman pottery. It's clearly post-dating the circular enclosure, and it's actually more of a squared enclosure that's been tacked onto the western side of the coaxial ditch system. And you can see we also exposed one of the pits that was also shown on the geophysical survey. This enclosure is absolutely full of pits, according to the geophysical survey. So hopefully when we do some analysis on the samples from that, it might give us an indication what's going on in that particular enclosure. So yeah, we're just briefly moving back to this idea that the collaboration we were undertaking with Time Team. So during the whole field school period, Philippa Langley, one of the lecturers here, undertook a massive task of interviewing lots of the students, trying to get their experiences. And Time Team have now taken that data on, and then they're going to produce a film. But also they did come and join us in November to undertake some additional filming for that feature. Which provided an opportunity to discuss the original aims of the excavation, looking at the original potential of the geophysics versus what we actually found in the excavation, and discussing the different skills that the students had gained during the excavation and the post-ex process. They visited one of Jeremy's teaching sessions, also went down to the labs where some of the students from the excavation were working on some of the environmental samples from the site with Will. Time Team are now busy editing all that footage in order to produce this short film on the student field school experience. This was originally due to be released end of this year, but currently it's looking like it might be early next year, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the final result on it. So finally, all that's left to say really is a massive thank you to everyone who was involved in this year's field school, all the staff, the students and the volunteers that helped. Believe it or not, we only had 9 days of excavation and we lost 1.5 of those days to bad weather. And generally the weather was pretty poor throughout the whole period. But despite this, we still managed to achieve all the main aims that we set out at the start of the project. And this was only possible through the hard work and dedication of everyone involved. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. You're getting a double team for Chester here. And the reason for this is that Joe and I both worked on quite different aspects of this field school. So we're going to split that up and talk about our separate parts. Now, it's quite different to the presentation we've had so far, because they've been very archaeological focused. They've been focusing on the sites themselves. What we'd like to look at is, what do field schools actually offer? What do we do? What do we give to the students? What do we give to the volunteers? What do we bring beyond just the archaeological findings? So that's kind of the focus that we're going for here. So I'm Graham, by the way, and this is Joe. We'll get started. So I've done the introductions. I'm Graham, Senior Archaeological Supervisor. ULAS, Joe's also now Senior Archaeological Supervisor. Well done, Joe. Interview today, say. And he leads on the excavation side at Chester Fieldschool. Now, it's a lovely little picture there of Joe wishing he was going to kill me, but I got away with it. Chester itself, it's a small Roman site. It's a small Roman town. I say it's not a small Roman site, it's huge. It's a small town. It's a walled town, and it's situated on the Chester House estate, which is a post-medieval farming estate that is just to the southeast of Wellingborough in Northamptonshire. And the Chester Field School has been a long-term collaborative research project that has included the School of Archaeology, ULAS, Chester House Estate, and the ARC, which is Northamptonshire Archaeological Resource Centre. Now, at this point, I'm going to pass you over to Joe, who's going to give you a bit of a background of the kinds of things, the excavations, and what was going on over there.
Thank you, Graham. Hello. So, just a quick background on the Chester House Estate. It's a nationally significant heritage site, which is the location of over 10,000 years of evidence of human activity from the Mesolithic through the Bronze Age, Iron Age, the Roman period, the medieval and the post-medieval. But perhaps the most significant of those is the remains of the walled Roman town of Chester, which is a scheduled ancient monument, which is its existence was known for quite a long time, but the first person to actually do any excavation there was the Reverend Baker in 1878. The town, the main town itself is walled, like you can see in the lovely illustration, but and that takes up on the modern side, that takes up a couple of meadow fields, but the suburban area beyond that is much broader, and it covers the entirety of the estate and beyond, and includes several known cemetery sites. The estate is also home to the Northamptonshire Archaeological Resources Centre, or ARC, which is a purpose-built facility designed to accommodate all of the archives, the material archives for all of Northamptonshire, which is quite an endeavour, and they're still unboxing all the finds. But it's a fantastic place, and the estate is also home to a learning department and a group of dedicated volunteers who are committed to skilling up community members and maintaining archaeological skills, and also perform. They're a vital part of our projects there and our collaborations there. Without them, we couldn't manage half of what we do at all. So, although the Roman town of Urchester is quite big, it is a scheduled monument, which means most of it has not been touched since 1878. There is a very small exception to that, which is the old orchard, which sits quite close to the post-medieval estate building. And it's one of the small areas of the site which hasn't been scheduled, and that's because eventually it was believed that Victorian landscaping had destroyed most of the archaeology there. Fortunately, in 2012, some excavations were conducted prior to some development which was going to happen, and they discovered that thankfully there was still quite a lot there. So from that point onwards, various members of the department and students became more and more involved in the project until 2019, when the University of Leicester undertook a major collaboration with Chester House Estate, along with us, ULAS, and the Archaeological Resource Centre, with the aim to providing a substantial archaeological experience and field school, and to provide training for both students and the Chester House volunteers who had been conducting excavations there since 2012. So by the time we got there, they knew far more about what we did. The excavations themselves have revealed quite a lot of evidence for the eastern suburbs of the town. We've had evidence of houses and workshops. Quite a lot of the excavation area has been, over the past couple of years, taken up by a Roman cemetery, a late period Roman cemetery. So far, I believe, as of this year, we have finally finished excavating the cemetery with a total of, I believe, it's approximately 110 individuals. And in addition to those, we've also had evidence of, we've had complete Roman pottery vessels, which are absolutely fantastic, and many, many, many coins, as you would expect. But one of the benefits of the excavation has been it's helped to support the existing Chester House education department at the school, and and just greatly benefit the community engagement activities that have been going on before the project began and following on from it. As part of the training, the project is primarily field school for University of Leicester students, mostly distance learning students. But through it, we've been able to offer lots more opportunities to the existing volunteers and to the wider community through outreach and engagement, various activities. The excavation itself has been supervised by ULAS staff, such as myself, who have been responsible for all the site excavation teaching, which has been all what we've tried to do is make sure both the students and the volunteers have been trained to the standard, to our standard, a modern professional standard, with the aim that they'll be able to take their skills and apply them to other projects in the future. In addition to that, we've also been offering additional training in the evening lectures. Many of the students who have stayed in the regional overnight on the project, since they've the distance learning students, so many of them have travelled quite a distance. But that has meant we've been able to offer more to them in addition to just the excavation. And with our partnerships with the estate and with the Arc and university, we've been able to really enrich their digging experience. And we've also made sure that there's been a dedicated place for the volunteers who've been excavating there since the very beginning and have continued to do so. So they've always had a place at our dig, and we make sure that they've always got more opportunities going forwards. And as on the subject of opportunities and such, Graham's going to talk about that stuff.
Okay, back to me. So Joe's given you an outline of the archaeological training side, what happens on the excavation, and how this partnership and collaboration between these different organisations allows us to draw on a whole set of unique skills and resources and offer something bigger, something better to a wider range of people. So following on from that theme, because this project's been going for quite a while, there's been a continual look at improving it. What can we do to improve it? And this has really been led by the Jeremy and Sarah Scott that have been involved in the professors and the Arc itself and the Chester House estate. And they've been talking with us at ULAS about what else can we do. It's a continual process. So in 2023, we took a big step forward on our community engagement. We decided to step it up. Now, the estate itself has community engagement. This goes on all the time. They have an education department that teaches school children. They come out, they show them around. But we were stepping it up, and we got together a project team to work on this. So it started with the development of the Heritage Hub, which is Sarah Scott set out of the university. And that pulled in some funding and helped pull us together as a wider team. And from that, we developed a partnership, a whole archaeological journey, community engagement for school children. This is a dedicated curriculum-led, curriculum-focused educational experience as archaeologists for school children from the whole range, from primary school, year 5, I think, was the youngest that we had. Maybe earlier, year 3. So 7, 8-year-olds, all the way up to 6th formers. So we got the whole range, and we designed the project so that we could upscale it, downscale it to be age appropriate, but essentially delivering the same project using the same kind of things. And our rough outline was that we were looking at the archaeological journey. So we're using the site, using all the experiences, using the facilities on the site to show the archaeological journey. So we started off with, how do we find sites? So clues in the landscapes. We went out, we looked around, we examined geophysics. We just looked at the landscape, used our eyes. That's how we start. We looked at discovering recording. So we got a tour around the excavation. This is where we really got to introduce them to Joe and harass him on a daily basis with loads of children. And then we took them into the Arc. There was a huge resource. It's material from all over Northamptonshire. We got some of that out. They got real handling opportunities. They really got get stuck in. But we also set up a laboratory in there. So they had an introduction to archaeological science, data visualization, finds analysis. So there's a whole range of materials we had going here. And this really ramped it up. So, we've got all sorts of stuff going on. And then big one, we turned it into a festival, Roman Fest. We had a 2-day Roman Fest centered around the whole of the experience. So really a big step up at that year in 2023. So not to be undone, we decided to do better. So we carried on this continuous development, and we follow a process of feedback. So we gather feedback, we constantly gathering feedback from the people that we are giving the experiences to, students, pupils, university students, volunteers. What can we do better? Not only the people who are coming to experience it, but also the people who are working on it. Because when we were delivering these experiences, we drew on the Chester House staff as well and their volunteers. And that was an opportunity for them to share their knowledge with us to share our knowledge with them. We're upskilling each other. So we always look at how can we get more out of each group involved, what can we give to each other, how can we improve everything that we're all getting from it. So, and this has carried on. So we've made steps to make it self-sufficient, because funding may not last forever. But if we can make it self-sufficient, this can keep going. We've extended it, so there's more flexibility on offer, but it means we can bring different groups in. So one of those groups was paid experience days. This happens very common these days, but we opened that up. That allowed us another income stream, but it also allowed us to meet different targets, different demographics, different groups. Also more opportunities for the volunteers as well to get involved. We drew in more of the volunteers to help out on our talks. We drew more of our own staff to give them the experience of delivering community events and excavations. Funded internship to boost our social media posts. These are all different things. Our skills and resources, we allowed how we presented it, the finds we came, the information we gave. The education department has allowed them to boosted their skills. So when we're not there, when they're delivering their programs through the rest of the year, they've already seen what they consider an increase in quality. They've got more knowledge, got more experience. They know how to use artifacts a bit more, and what kind of stories they can tell with those, and how they can bring education alive. And like I've already said, we've got feedback-led amendments. So in 2024, we expanded our laboratory, super popular. So we expanded that, gave them more time, and we added extra handling sessions, fines, washing, super popular. And this is just the process, the basic process we follow for continuous improvement. And so where did this lead? The wider recognition. This project's been going for quite a while. So the projects you've seen earlier, quite early stages, was a 1-year project, was a 2-year project. It's been going for quite some time. So it has allowed us to build up. And this has led to, we actually won the CBA Archaeological Achievement Award 2024 for learning, training and skills this year. The award's been half-inched by the ARC, I believe. So I'll parade it around in glory today. But we do have a lovely picture of us up there. These are the team lead. We've got sort of representatives from the main partnerships, from all the partnerships around there. Can you just move to the side for a moment, Joe? Because I particularly like this photo. The moment we found that we'd won. But the year before, we've been nominated in 2 categories as well. Similar categories, one of the same. I think we joined them together. We realised it was actually the same thing. It was part of the parcel. We didn't want to split it up, so we put it in. And it's so popular that at the moment, 70% of the slots are already booked for next summer. There's people coming back. There's people coming from further and further afield, travelling to come and experience this whole archaeological festival that we've managed to create. And I suppose just to one of the quotes from the judges of the Achievement Awards: this project clearly touched the lives of many different people, from school children, volunteers to professionals. Thousands of people benefited from this project, exemplifying and promoting the role and value of archaeology. Well done. And it was the partnership work that we did, how we worked as a partnership, the fact that we drew in different groups, the fact that we pulled in the community, that we've reached out to a huge range of people. We couldn't have done it without partnerships. We all brought something to this. And this is one of the things I really wanted to focus on, is how well we can work as a group and make something bigger and better. I think that's us for today. Thank you very much.
Doing a bit of a swap over here. Right, well, good evening, everybody. Well, after that rather spectacular collaboration, we're coming to another one. But I'm sort of going to draw things back a little bit to the university, because I'm going to talk about what happens to all the finds and samples at the end of field work and their journey through our labs, and then say a little bit more about some of the information that is starting to emerge from another field school, the Rutland Villa, and the assessment that we're doing. So we're going to sort of move away from these wonderful sunny days of field work and lots of people getting together and enjoying themselves and having lunch in the sunshine. And we're going to take a peek at the next stage of these projects. So although finds processing and what comes after is no less vital than excavation, it's often a part that is less often seen, it's less visible really. But the finds and the samples can not only enhance what we know from a site when we leave site, but they can also completely transform our understanding. So much of this work takes place in the Bennett Underpass, a place that some of you may have visited, and if you haven't, as you can see, it is a marvellous place to be. Okay, possibly not the most glamorous of locations. But what do we do down there? Well, to be honest, we are the beating heart of the ULAS operation. We take the finds in their muddy state from site, we clean them appropriately, we categorise things, we bag things ready for the next stage, which is to be looked at by specialists. Similarly, the soil samples are wet sieved and floated in our tank, leaving flots and heavy residues, which are separated by size. And these are sorted to retrieve various finds and environmental evidence. So we're looking at things like small bones, so mice, voles, that kind of thing, birds, fish, charred plant remains, of course, shells, and also things like industrial evidence, so slag and hammer scale. And sometimes we even find small finds that have been missed in hand excavation. So you might find little things such as beads or coins. And when processed, all these materials are ready to be shown to the relevant specialists. What I would like to highlight here is how grateful we are to have the help of our regular volunteers and our student interns. So the internship is very ably led by Will, who is sitting in the audience there. And we feel that it is particularly good to involve the students and volunteers in the processing of finds and samples from the field school sites, because as much as anything, a lot of them may well have worked on that site, and it's much more exciting and much more satisfying really to process material that you're likely to have dug up yourself. And of course, other benefits to the students include the opportunity to handle different types of archaeological materials, and they can actually take that time to find out what interests them as well. So they're gaining real work experience on live projects and learning how to deal with the different artefacts. And it also gives them an understanding of how a commercial archaeological unit operates. So it really gives students the chance to decide if they might actually be interested in pursuing commercial archaeology as a career. Yes, and having been in it for a long time, I can thoroughly recommend it every last minute. So anyway, it's really good to get people's involvement. I want to give a bit, is Kate here? I'll give a quick shout out to her because she's looking at all the environmental remains from Lawton. So again, you know, we're able to really sort of help people take part in our projects. So we're going to continue now to the Rutland Villa. This was a student field school in 2021 and 2022. You might have heard there was a mosaic there, I think. Possibly that news has leaked out anyway. So the Rutland Villa excavations came to an end in 2022. And we didn't leave site empty-handed. We left with 300 boxes of finds. So it took a while, but these materials have now been processed, and we're in the next stage of the post-excavation journey, which is assessment. So I can hear how excited you all are by that. So, what is post-excavation assessment and how does it differ from analysis? Well, let me tell you, an assessment is pretty much standard practice for larger sites, and it typically the material goes to the various specialists and they will record the quantity and the quality of their assemblages. So finds are identified, quantified, basic information is recorded, and the specialist will determine how the assemblage can contribute to the research aims and objectives of the project. And as part of this, a statement of significance is produced, which will help identify the archaeological value of an assemblage and what we could potentially learn. So that's where the next stage comes in, because we'll need to identify the resources that we'll have to find to carry out the further work. So collectively, the assessment considers the potential of the site as a whole to add significantly to the archaeological knowledge. And it also defines the priorities for the final report and any publications that we're going to do. So all being well, the analysis phase will follow. Now, the next few slides just offer a few highlights from the assessment programme so far and show how the finds are enhancing understanding of this late villa complex. So first up, we have the painted wall plaster. Now, this has been looked at by Heidi Addison, and she is exploring the differences that we're seeing between buildings. So we're quite lucky on this site because we have excavated quite a good sample of the area. So we are able to take assemblages from different parts of the site and compare them. So just in simple terms then, we are sort of seeing different colours in the different areas. So with the aisled building, which you'll see there at the bottom of the plan, we've got a lot of red, we've got a lot of green, we've got a lot of green and white, and a lot of red and white. But we're seeing much greater variation of colours in the main villa building. So it looks, what Heidi's been able to determine so far is that there may well have been some kind of scenery on the walls of the main villa building rather than just having large panels of particular colours. I mean, this is probably what you might expect at the fancier end of the villa, but it is really good and useful information. So Rachel Armitage of the school has helped us with a pilot experiment to look at the elements using the Tornado XRF. And we do hope to expand on this sort of work during the analysis process to compare the pigments that are being used, not only across the site, but also on comparative sites. So as you can see there, you get these rather wonderful psychedelic images from the XRF. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some more of those. So we also are looking at a range of objects across the site, and we're looking at where those objects turn up, so the distribution of them. Because we're hoping that these can identify particular activities that are happening across the site. Maybe we can even determine the function of various buildings. So on the side there, you will see a quern, which obviously for grinding grain, and it's going to be interesting to see where these turn up. We already know that we've got a concentration of them where we don't expect things like that to be in the main villa building. So that's quite interesting. The plant remains so far are the usual range of cereals that we might expect from a Roman villa. So we've got oats, we've got barley, we've got wheat and other edible weeds and other edible species. Now, many large Roman villas were agricultural producers. So here we've got a steel yard weight, which is really demonstrating that the ability to weigh was really important. And we've got objects such as the plumb bob. So you could consider things that have perhaps been used to lay out things around the villa, a sort of survey tool of some sort. We've got copper alloy dividers, which were probably used for tasks like marking out decorative designs on plasterwork, or possibly used as writing equipment as well. Just to say another shout out for the MAB here, that we've successfully 3D printed these dividers, and we were able to do it even at double size to enable people to see the patterns on them more clearly. So that's a great thing. It's a great thing to have that sort of skill in our armoury. And you'll also see here an iron stylus, which was for use with a wax writing tablet, and this points out the sort of admin and literacy that you were seeing on the villa site. So there are also some rather interesting insights from the plant remains, which have been looked at by Rachel Small. And the one that I particularly like is this. So this is remains from the aisled building that was near the river. Now, in the later part of the aisled building's existence, it was converted into a corn dryer. And this obviously suggests that this has fallen out of residential use. Therefore, some of the other buildings are likely to have sort of become had a residential function at that time. Now, charred grains have been identified as spelt wheat, but there's something quite exciting about these. So if you can see those photographs we've got there, and they are showing little sprouts. So essentially, these sprouts are indicating that malting is taking place. And what does malting mean, everybody? What do you think? It means beer brewing. That's right. So, you know, that's great news for the inhabitants of the villa, but also very interesting information for us. So, you know, this is quite a large corn dryer, and unlike some of those smaller ones that we saw on one of the other, which one was it?
Lawton.
Lawton, thank you. It's a long time ago now, but yes, Lawton. So, you know, this is much larger corn dryer, and it does sort of, it indicates they're making beer for, you know, the other occupants of the site, the people that are living and working on there. Now, I have it on some authority anyway that this beer doesn't travel very well, so we think that it probably is for use within the site itself. But anyway, all good and exciting stuff. So personal items, well, these bring us even closer really to the inhabitants of the villa, and you know what they wore and what, you know, what things were important to them. So we've got evidence such as the nail cleaner for you know, grooming and bathing at the site. We've got bone hairpins, so they're indicating sophistication really, that we've got women wearing these, you know, fancy hairstyles. You know, they've got their hair pinned up, you know, with these lovely bone hairpins. We've also got jewellery such as shale armlet. And the thing that I particularly like is this inlaid, well, the remains of this inlaid bone casket. So we kept finding all these little bits of bone with little stripes carved into them. And of course, once we get all the information together, we can see that these things belong together, and they're likely to have been a casket which could have kept some of these nice things like jewellery or perhaps perfumes, something like that. So again, it's you know, it's you know, showing the wealthy women, you know, had quite a nice life on this site. So what else do we have? Yes. So this dolphin buckle is another interesting and important object. So what, I don't know if you can see it very well, but basically it's two dolphin heads facing each other. And the interesting thing about this is that it has a military connection, and these are also very, very late objects. So we're looking at very late 4th century or possibly even 5th century, which is very interesting when you think about the ending of this Roman villa and how we're already starting to understand that there's quite a staggered end to Roman life in Britain. And the final thing I'm just going to tell you about here is that this jar pendant, there's probably quite a story here as well, because this is made of glass, but it's coloured to look like amber. It's 4th century in date, and it's most likely from Roman Syria, Palestine region. And interestingly, others from Britain have been from burials. So I hope that by highlighting some of the directions of research, I've whetted your appetite for more, because there's still a lot more to learn from this very extraordinary site. Let's hope it sees the light of day again.
Jen. So, hearing all of those about all of those fantastic projects, I think it really kind of highlights the fact that at the core of all these projects, there's a great partnership between ULAS and the department, but the connections that we both can bring to bring in much more people and groups into these projects really enriches them, involves more people, and makes it a lot more collaborative in terms of the research and the experience for everyone, but also there's knock-on effects for that. So a really good example is this knock-on effect from the involvement of John Gator and Sumo with Ketton, and the resulting involvement of Time Team with the CAP6 site, which, let's face it, when they do this report, it's going to be a fantastic free advert for the department and all the work we do. And it's a result of one of these connections which kind of leads us to this next one. You'd be forgiven for thinking that we just concentrate on Roman things, the run of Roman sites recently, but we're kind of shifting our focus to a different period with this one. Largely, and the beginning of this project was the villagers of this place called Loddington, which not to be confused with the Loddington in Northamptonshire, which seems to come up tops on the Google search. That's over near Corby. Don't suppose you'd really want to go there, but I don't know, it might be all right. But this Loddington, just on the border with Leicestershire and Rutland, is a really quaint, lovely little picture postcard medieval village. It's really tiny. There's not many people live there, but the villagers came together just before COVID, I guess, and got in touch with us because they wanted to put together a Heritage Lottery funded project to essentially try and kind of maintain the church in the village. But they recognised that as part of this, it could be a much bigger archaeological project which involved the community, and they wanted us to help with that. So they got in touch with ULAS and Peter Liddell, who'd done some work in the area as well with the field workers. And so you can see these connections are really sort of bringing this community to us to help with their project. Now, unfortunately, that didn't really take off, and they didn't really get their money, but it did raise a big sort of question, because when Pete and I went to visit, we sort of recognised this could really be a great kind of topic for a field school, and obviously it's been a few years since we met with them, but it came back recently when we were starting to think, well, where should we go next, and what would make a really good project? It's you can see it's probably a tiny little area. It's very unspoilt. There's hardly been any archaeology done there at all. But it is a great example of a sort of currently occupied village which had its establishment in the medieval period, which is ripe for research, really. There is a little bit of history, though, to this. The great potential was sort of realised in terms of the below ground archaeology by an evaluation that ULAS did for housing development within or proposed housing development within the grounds of the hall, which rather excitingly kind of produced really nice, well-preserved evidence for Anglo-Saxon occupation and early medieval 10th, 11th century occupation within that area. That is all still there because the housing development didn't go ahead, but it really highlighted the fact there's some very nicely preserved archaeology actually inside the village itself. And to find Anglo-Saxon archaeology within a village is extremely rare. As said, Pete Liddell and the Leicestershire field workers have had a massive involvement as well with understanding the potential of this site, because they chose this area as a training exercise for the field workers to do field walking. A lot of this land is owned by either one big farm or a place called the Allerton Project, which is a set up in the village, and it's an agricultural research kind of company or project, and they were very keen on understanding the effects of archaeology with rural agriculture. So they're really keen on kind of this research project too. So that highlighted lots of really good evidence around the village in the arable fields that could be walked, but obviously there's lots of green space as well. There's lots of earthworks, and you can see ridge and furrow. Lots of nice village earthworks in and around the currently occupied space. As I mentioned, there's this Heritage Lottery Fund application in 2019, and here we are now with the search for new field school, and we've chosen this as the new focus. So we started with pulling together all of the known records for the area into a big desk-based assessment, which is normally the kind of starting point really for a research project, trying to work out what is known and where we could go. So this is one of the early maps from the area, the 1848 tithe map, and you can see that there's even then there's not a lot going on. One of the interesting things about this village is that you can see there's the focus of occupation there, but the church is actually quite remote from the village. Here's the earthwork plan, and you can see this. Well, these stripes represent ridge and furrow, so there's an agricultural field separating the church from the rest of the village, and you can see from the earthworks that actually in the medieval period potentially it was a much larger place. All of these earthworks here represent hollow ways and house platforms of the former village area. You've got a whole spread to the south of Loddington Hall, and so really you've got another half of the village potentially that was occupied at that point. And we know that these villages can shrink, they can move around, but we don't know when this could be, what sort of date it could be. So there's lots of really good research questions to address here. And you can see from the LiDAR information that the earthworks stand out very nicely. Some lovely ridge and furrow up there with some quarrying. And then you can see all of the earthworks that we just looked at on the earthwork plan. This is a picture that was gleaned from the surrounding area, from the field walking. Lots of really good evidence suggesting occupation all the way through from the pre-Iron Age, so flint scatters. Some really good evidence for Roman and Anglo-Saxon occupation, but also some really nice scatters quite close to the village with early medieval pottery actually within the ploughed field. So that's suggesting that even though we can see that there's more of the village of the early village to be had in the earthwork areas, that there's potentially even more areas that were occupied that have since been ploughed away. So there's more archaeology to be found there and understood. And this is what we're going to be looking at as the project develops. It's going to be the new focus for the first and second years. And one of the things we wanted to do was look at some of the earthwork fields just to get an idea of what we might find under them. And we've been working with the geophysical survey team from Leicester Fieldworkers this autumn. Here they are in action in that field to the south of the hall. And they have produced some very nice results. You can see that field is actually quite full of archaeological things, whatever they might be. We don't really know as yet. But interestingly, that question mark we had about the church, it doesn't seem like there's much more there than ridge and furrow. So we kind of might have been expecting some exciting archaeology underneath the ridge and furrow. That doesn't seem to be playing out at the moment, but clearly the focus of the interest so far from the geophysical survey is that area to the south of the hall. You can see in the earthworks there's adjacent to the central road there's 3 tiered platforms, which may have been where 3 houses were adjacent to one of the main thoroughfares through the village. But there's also lots of boundaries and big pit-like looking things that we can explore in that first couple of years of the field school. So the East Midlands is a very good place because it does contain villages like this that have got these, they're still occupied, but they've got these fantastic sort of untouched, really, virtually untouched areas of historic remains that can tell us an awful lot about how these villages developed and when they were founded. And that is a real hot topic in terms of the research questions for the period. And so this is a great opportunity to present a really well-informed and researched project to add to that narrative for the whole of the country, really. A lot of the work that ULAS does in villages is based around modern housing developments, and of course we don't choose where they go. Sometimes we get lucky and we find really nice evidence of medieval villages and that can add to that story. We did one earlier this year where we found a medieval building that fantastically survived just by chance. but quite often we'll just get the edges of plots, ditches and things. We can add a little bit of a narrative in there. Test pitting in villages gives you another aspect, but again, they're just tiny little windows in. By being able to approach a site like this, which is pretty sort of fresh, and we can choose where to go, we'll be able to sort of think about what the questions we want to answer and hopefully get the results that we need to answer them. And so we'll be developing that partnership idea again. We're going to be working with the local community. We know from that original project idea that the people in the village are really keen to know more about where they live and the history of where they live. So we'll be working closely with them, getting them involved. We're working with the field workers and of course the students. And I think it's something that as it develops, we'll be able to sort of build on that. And in the same way that all of the other projects have done, learn those lessons from the other preceding projects, find out what works and what doesn't, how to engage people, and hopefully get people out into this lovely part of Leicestershire to see what's going on and help educate them and get them involved. So yeah, here we go, another fantastic project to look forward to. More on this next year. Thanks very much.
Lots of exciting things happening. Unfortunately, we have gone over our allotted hours, so if anyone has questions online, you can put them in the chat and we'll pass them along, or I guess send to ulas@leicester.ac.uk. For anyone with questions in the room, take them outside. We'll be going to the Old Halls pub, so always a chance for questions there. That is our final seminar for the term, so thank you for joining us either today or across the board. We'll be sending out a bit of a teaser for next term next week via departmental channels, and all I have left to say is thank you, and can we give another round of applause to the ULAS?